And I'd like to invite John Bradford of Techstars and Rune Thiel from Rockstar to talk about the state of accelerators with how the web's Mircea Vadan.
Thank you.
Hello.
So thank you very much for being here. First question, actually I have three questions, quite simple. First, it's about you. Just to tell us a little bit, what is your experience with accelerators? How many dozens have you worked with, batches, and so on? Just a broad overview about your
He's pointing at me, right? But he's the godfather in Europe, so I think John's the start.
That just means I'm very old.
All right, so experience with accelerators. Well, around 13 years ago, I started my own tech company. And I thought I knew exactly what I was doing. I, of course, found out, like anyone else, that I didn't. And I realized that the most important thing you can have around you is network and knowledge. So I gradually got involved with accelerators and started my own. Rockstar in 2011 was now invested in 98 companies. We have a couple of different verticals: smart energy, digital health, web mobile, which is a horizontal program, and we're starting food tech and AI. We're primarily in Europe, but also starting in Colombia. So that's the brief intro. John only have 10 minutes, so I'm actually
yeah,
I'm
I was
hurrying
going to
for
say,
him.
I'll apologize in advance. At 6:05, I have to run out the door. I'm at a conference call. I'm going to be 5 minutes late, but I can't be any later than 5 or my boss will fire me. So my background was boring accountant, worked 10 years there, 10 years doing startups really badly, lucked out, became a small seed funder at one point, had $250,000 left in the bank account, so to speak, to make my last investment, and I had this crazy idea of, instead of one check, why don't I write 10 checks for 25K? Emailed Paul Graham at Y Combinator, he told me where to stick it where the sun don't shine. David Cohen, emailed him, and he said, yeah, whatever I can do to help. And he helped me set up the first accelerator bootcamp outside of US. Ironically, in that process of being super easy and helpful and simple for me, 3 years later he came back and knocked to my door and said, we don't want to be Techstars just in the US anymore, we want to be international. And helped them launch Techstars internationally. When I left, when I joined, Techstars was 5 or 6 programs. When I left, it was 23, I think. And in the meantime, not quite. I've done 104 investments personally through 10 accelerator programs in about 5 years, which is just totally insane and should never be, anybody should ever try to do it again.
So, tell us, how did the accelerator ecosystem evolve in Europe in the last 3 years, and what is the actual status quo now from your point of view?
I'll start and you can finish. How about that? So, started bootcamp, Alex Farset and I were kind of the first couple in the process. Seedcamp did a version of an accelerator program very similar to YC initially prior to that. And initially the first kind of wave were lots of individual entities. So I helped, I think, over a period of a couple of years, 10 or 12 programs start. But they were just individual accelerators of, I think this is a great idea, I'll do it in Poland, or I'll do it in Lithuania, or I'll do it in Estonia. And I think, I don't know, I haven't done the numbers, my guess is of those, probably 50% still exist in some form or fashion. And then there was a wave of corporate programs which came online. Wyra was the first one, Barclays got involved 2 or 3 years ago. And do you want to talk about where the market is today in terms of consolidating?
Yeah, I can do that. I think also what John is saying, he was one of the first guys along with Alex. Actually, I worked for Alex for a year, not so much with the accelerator, but getting close to the sort of environment and where things were happening. And not a lot of the people who got started out knew exactly what they were doing, what they were getting themselves into, including us. 27 years old, 2 guys getting together, teaming up with a little bit more gray hair, but we did not foresee what we were going to have to do to make this into a real business. And I think a lot of other accelerators started with the same mindset, that they wanted to do something for their local ecosystem. They really wanted to get involved and support startups, but realizing that the model, you really have to build it out to a larger scale. So you look something like Techstars with was it 14 different programs today?
North of 20, I think.
Okay.
I think they've launched another 2 in the last 2 weeks.
And for a lot of accelerators, that was just not possible. Or haven't been possible to get that amount of traction in a local market. So I think what we're starting to see now is either you're building out the model, so you, for example, adding a seed fund on top of it, or you start collaborating more with corporates. And that's for part of our verticals, also what we do, not for the sake of the corporates, but also because we see in those verticals it's very important for startups to have access and distribution with corporates. But from the original, just the investment proposition, raising from local angels, I think we're way beyond that. You need to think it much bigger than just your local ecosystem, and working with corporates or raising a seed fund on top of it makes sense.
Yeah, so to jump into that and bring it to a close, the way I look at it is the market's consolidating, which is you either have to just go big or go home. And what I mean by that is you need to create a robust enough structure that you can run not just one, but multiple programs a year. It might be multiple locations. But you also have to have the capacity to be able to swap out managing directors along the way. The thing I personally believe, and I've seen inside Techstars, is there is a view towards managing directors, we call them managing directors, which will come and go. They'll be there for 2 or 3 programs and then they'll move on. But you need to create a structure around those guys that allows new guys to come in, to bring their knowledge and experience, but the underlying structure continues to operate. Techstars, you've done this. Then you have the corporates coming in. It's an interesting model and I'll touch on it, but I think it's worth exploring. But essentially it's moving towards effectively what I call a zero equity model, which kind of allows you to look at much later stage businesses than you would have had historically. But unless you are one of those larger ones, I call it charity work. I mean, you work your nuts off to do these things, and you spend 13 weeks locked in a room eating pizza and beer and put on way too much weight. And essentially, there is a bit of a payback somewhere down the line, but it doesn't even get close to the amount of energy and effort that you have to put into it. And so you'll see people set these things up, think they're amazing, and then go, holy crap, this is hard work. And then they'll shut it down after a couple of sessions.
Okay, thanks. How do you think the value proposition of accelerators towards startups will evolve? I mean, now we have many accelerators in Europe. It's like a boom in the last 3-4 years. And it's much more harder now to come up with something which is relevant for the startups compared with all the other entities. Do you see something new shifting in the value proposition? How is the trend going in this direction?
I can give this a go. So when we started out, I think we were very focused on this program idea, where you come into the program and you stay for 6 months, and then you take off, and everything is perfect and pink. We're moving away from that idea, so we're pitching ourselves as supporting the first 1,000 days, and we created different products offering. Of course, that has to be commercially sensible in order to support startups in the different phases. So the acceleration is actually just one phase that we look at, but then after that we have also co-working space in Amsterdam, 2,500 square meters, where from that we can support startups, and we're adding the fund on top of it. So then suddenly we're getting paid for actually supporting startups, not just in the program phase, but also post-program, which I think was the only natural evolution for us, because we were doing that work anyway. We were actually supporting suddenly 100 startups in our alumni network, but we were not getting paid for it. We were only getting paid for the moment we were running the program.
So that's really important to recognize, which is the smarter and the better accelerator programs are building funds on top of themselves. And so if you look at Y Combinator, they've got a $700 million fund. Techstars, their first one was 150. I suspect they're probably in the process of raising another one. But essentially what it does is it creates enough of a management fee that kicks off that allows you to run a program underneath it. And it also demonstrates that you are there not just for the start, but on the journey for the longer purposes. If a program, in a weird way, can't raise a fund on the back of itself. There's a question of, are they actually making enough of a return that actually justifies themselves? Or is it genuinely charity work? The other side of that equation, which is the stuff I've been spending a lot of my time and energy, interestingly, is looking at corporate and corporate activity. So I was probably one of the biggest cynics around corporate accelerator programs initially, and I suspect 2 or 3 years later, I'm pretty big and bullish about it, but under certain conditions. And the conditions are essentially, I don't think a corporate should ever take equity in a startup. Full stop, end of story. They should run the program. It should be for the benefit of the startups, but also mutually beneficial in terms of trying to find and identify interesting startups which they can use and support and give contracts to. So the valuable part is writing MOUs, getting letters of intent, actually doing pilots with early stage startups, but no equity involved. What that also does practically, is that it means that you can attract much later stage businesses from a corporate. So I'm thinking with the corporate's hat on, not necessarily an investor's hat on. So a corporate really needs to be working with what I call a pre-Series A, Series A type team, which has sufficiently robust solution that they can actually deploy it at scale. The problem that I think corporates have with accelerators is they get really excited about these startups and then they go, oh, you haven't actually built anything yet, or it's not production ready. And so you actually almost feel them kind of going, oh, we'll come back in 12 months. And clearly in 12 months' time, they've moved on and they've got another shiny toy to play with instead. But I can see there being a shift towards later stage zero equity models for corporates when they get past we're just doing it for equity. And good examples of that are MasterCard do a program, and they think of it more as a program rather than an accelerator. Microsoft did this as well, but there are still who are still set in their ways and stuck to, and we have to have equity.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think we can take one question from the public.
Is the public out there?
Yeah.
Oh, they're
Just
laughing.
can't see it because of the light.
Yeah.
We have one.
Any questions, or I'm going to run away?
Close up.
I can't see. Where?
Here.
Where?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Jesus, mother God, up there. Right, okay, go on.
Yeah. So,
Tuesday.
yeah. What do you think is the future? Because we've been discussing about like these accelerator networks or big accelerators such as Startup Bootcamp or Techstars, which have the advantage of like large networks, resources, a good brand, versus more and more smaller accelerators which are built using European funding or like at very small local level. What do you think is the future of those like smaller accelerators? Do they have any chances of success or not really?
My honest answer is it's going to get harder and harder for them to sustain themselves. It becomes harder, therefore, to attract the best managing directors, and therefore it's really hard to create real value for the startups, is the honest answer. It's not to say they will disappear, but I think what you'll find is them, and I've seen this, which is Techstars, when I was running it, was actually taking companies from other Eastern European programs. And as long as they were being sensible about their equity, I was more than happy to accommodate them at that point.
Yeah, same. I think there's opportunities to make spin-off business from the network that you create through an accelerator and the leverage you have by actually working with startups. I think the sort of the corporate innovation angle that a lot are moving into, it's not, you can turn that direction and turn it into a good business, but I think as a standalone investment proposition for a local market, I also see that being difficult.
I can say from my own personal experience, it is really, really hard to make money as a managing director inside a program. Yeah, it's not a get-rich-soon kind of moment.
And that would be the conclusion of our
And
panel.
yes, accelerators are charity work.
It's for fun. Yeah.
Oh, no, and actually, look, I say all of that. I did 10 programs in 5 years, but they are, on the other side, incredibly addictive. It's really hard not to want to help people who really want to kind of change the world. I mean, that's the bit, that's the reason why you can pay people so little money to run an accelerator program, but at a certain point it breaks. You kind of go, I can't do this forever. I need to go and make some real money somewhere.
It is a slow-moving business, but that's not the reason why we got started in the first place, right? So I guess it's like running a conference without knowing the details of that, but yeah.
It can be addictive also from the participant's point of view, because I have a friend who went through 5 accelerators with 5 different startups.
He needs to, yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you very much, John.
Not at all, thank you.
Thank you.
John will jump into his Skype call, but you can talk with Rune here now at the exit.
I'm around later for a beer.